There we go. All right. I will get started. My name is James Pepper, Chair of the Cannabis Control Board. Today is Wednesday, August 26th, 2026. It's 1:03 p.m. and I call this meeting to order. Before we get started, just a quick update to the agenda. We're going to add an executive session for the board to get updated on a confidential, investigative, and legal matter. I think I'm going to put that right before we adjourn. So the second to last item. And so that folks that after we're done with the kind of licensing issues for executive session, and then when we come out, adjourn afterwards. Any other changes to the agenda? No. All right. So some brief opening remarks. We have tentatively scheduled our next enhanced bud tender training for mid-October. As a reminder, any bud tenders working at a medically endorsed retail operation need to complete this training. So if you have an MUE or you're thinking about applying for one, make sure to direct your employees to the sign up page, which is ccb.vermont.gov/training sign up. This may be the last one for a little bit. We're going to take all of the feedback that we've received from the first 5, update the content, and then package it up a little bit differently so that the training can be done on demand. But again, the tentative date for the next training is October 15th. We'll have that kind of locked in, hopefully by the end of the week. Sign up again, ccb.vermont.gov/training sign up. And then once we have the date finalized, we'll be in touch with anyone who's enrolled and give them the instructions. Let's see. I wanted to touch quickly. This is more just educational for us. The 2025 Youth Risk Behavioral Survey results have been published. This is a biennial, once every 2 years, survey that goes out to all middle school and high school kids. It's confidential, so usually people are pretty honest in it. We're comparing trends over time with this survey. So there's actually some decent numbers in this survey as compared to kind of prior surveys. So just some key highlights: 18% of youth, so this is people kind of 18 and under, have reported using cannabis within the past 30 days. That is down from a pre-legalization high point of 27%. So it's a good trend to be seeing. There's a question about how easy is it to access cannabis. 47% said that it was either very easy or sort of easy. That is also a decrease from a 62% pre-legalization number. And just by way of reference, they also compare that to alcohol. And alcohol, 60% of kids said that cannabis was very easy or sort of easy to obtain. So just kind of a good trend there. The perception of harm. So 64% of kids think it is wrong or very wrong for someone their age to use marijuana. So that is also trending kind of in the right direction. This wasn't on the Youth Risk Behavioral Survey, but also the New England Poison Control looks at accidental exposures to cannabis from the calls that they receive and lists it by state and by age demographic. And we've remained consistent with that in the past 2 years at 25 in the 0 to 19 range. Also just wanted to mention that we do have a work group scheduled coming up. It's on product equivalencies. It's next Wednesday, September 2nd from 10 to 11 a.m. And all the information to join that work group and participate is on our website, ccb.vermont.gov/working groups. And then other than that, just need to approve our minutes from our last regular board meeting, which was on July 29th, and our special meeting, which is on August 12th. Is there a motion?
So I would just note we haven't done the minutes for August 12th yet, so you only have minutes.
Just for the...
For there. And
okay.
Right.
I also circulated some minutes from the first retail siting work group that hadn't been discussed yet. Did you guys have time to...
I figured you could just approve those at the next retail setting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
But is there a motion to approve the minutes from our last board meeting on July 29th.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Next up, public comment. Is joined by the link and would like to make a public comment, please raise your virtual hands. And then we'll move to people who joined by a phone, but we do have some guests in the room. Do you guys want to make a public comment?
I'm good for this minute.
Sure.
Yeah.
No? Okay. Anyone on the link, feel free to raise your virtual hand if you'd like to comment. Start with James Lang.
Hello, can you hear me all right? Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Sorry about that. I just wanted to really quick request, if possible, that the board look into automations for posting that product registration spreadsheet to the PR portal every single day. I think that there's a issue. It's a slight issue with Dutchie where they're processing the weekly spreadsheet, but items that get registered or unregistered that week don't pop. I don't think they're going through the API, but that's all. That's all that I had.
Yeah. Thanks for the suggestion. Anyone else for public comment? And if you join by a phone, you can unmute by hitting *6. Andy?
Thank you. Two things I wanted to address that I think impacts everyone, or at least most people. One is we've been receiving different responses from the CCB regarding emails and notifications, and more specifically, it seems like one email is used for all of licensing for our like retail or manufacturing license, and the same email has to be used for notifications for like product registrations or notices to submit. And we were told at one time that those two could be separated. And since based on functions, a lot of businesses probably have different people doing different things. And we've been attempting to have a second email for product registrations and notices to submit separate from the licensing. We're now being told it can only be one person, which doesn't make sense to us. So if we could get clarification on that, we've been trying to do this for a couple of months, that would be great. And the second is on the retail siding workshops. First, thank you for the second set of meetings. We felt it was just a vast improvement of the initial meeting, and we appreciate all the working groups and all the work that's going into it. That said, many of us retailers are a little confused about the intent, as we didn't receive any questionnaires or there were no meetings, it seemed like, that were from the retailer's perspective. Instead, it was cultivators and access to retail or customer access to retail. But when you have to look at supply and demand, and for what the statute says, it's geographic dispersion and it's on some, it's, demographics and market need. So it seems like we're not looking at the full equation. And it feels like so we're a little confused, and we didn't know how to respond to the questionnaires. And then just related, we understand that there is a statutory, whether you want to call it a bias or a preference for small cultivators versus, let's say, larger cultivators. We've asked both the CCB board and CCB staff if there are statutes that favor or that have a preference for cultivators versus retailers, because some of us keep feeling like there is this bias, but maybe it's statutory, but we haven't gotten responses from either. So if there is, if we could be alerted to such, that would be very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy. I think all the right people in the room heard your questions. So anyone else? You don't have to, if you can get here if you want, or you can stay there. Either is fine. Okay.
Yeah, Sin from Snowbird Botanicals was here in June. Didn't be able to make it for July. Hard for us to make it here today, but again, came straight from the field because we're really trying to be intentional. Because I guess all the there's this bias towards cultivator because I didn't know that we were being treated as VIP, but it actually feels more like we don't get heard, or we're not able to make it to meetings like this. So it seems some people don't get to it quite frequently because they have the time, but we're really mostly in the field doing work, not able to even get kind of the work we need to get done to get orders out, to have labor force, to there's bottlenecks every which way we turn with all the different hats we have to wear, and just seeing how minimum CCB officers are terminating one license a month. I mean, I think that bias needs to be there. I think a preference does need to be there for the smaller people that, are doing this out of pure passion, because obviously we're not getting rich. We're not trying to either. We really just want to get by. We just wanted to cover our life, which is not very extravagant either. It's a car, a farm, our main business expenses, and then we just want to live, take like maybe one vacation a year, something like that, like a realistic, not trying to do anything crazy. We just don't want to be forced to sell vegetables or do something else because it makes more sense for us to be at farmers markets. It makes more sense because our communities know us. They've been watching us since we handmade our mounds in our field back in like CCB days. So it's just a lot of love, a lot of labor that we don't want to give up on. But it does feel difficult without that direct access. It does feel difficult with the limitations that we have. It does feel difficult having to do all of the outreach as well. When I think at this point, you can there's a lot of systems for sales that show you where your stock is at, and show you where your things are at. And that outreach can happen kind of in both directions a little bit more. We really don't need more than 10 dispensaries to be very, very successful. Honestly, 2 can keep us busy enough that we can't get the orders out. And it's not that there isn't demand for it, it's that we don't have the literal time to split between doing the farm work and getting the orders out ourselves. But if we bring labor on, then the funds don't cover everything. Then all of our profits go to that labor force, which we've also had a year having done that as well. So it's just a difficult kind of a hill we're climbing, but we do see a small growth every year, which is why we continue. It's why we have better relationships, we have better kind of brand awareness and better kind of, I guess, business going on. But it's by very little. It just is like, do this or the veggies or the farmers markets or which a lot of people have to add that and, because then this becomes kind of like a side thing. And then people have to get a real job, so to speak, to cover their actual lives. And then the farming can be done on the side. But that will hurt people who do it as their entire lives, because then we can't afford to live off those prices. Buying pre-rolls at a price that puts a farm out of business is putting that farm out of business. There can be special deals made when there's maybe a quantity or there's like a monthly, but we don't even know anyone willing to go on like a monthly contract to say like, oh, I'll just get this much from you a month, even if it's a small amount, but just to know that there's some consistency. So we're just really always kind of feeling like we're fighting for our lives, and definitely don't feel very VIP, but it's a question that way sometimes, but it's definitely not where we're at.
Thank you for the comment. I know it is difficult to try and attend these meetings and always know when they're happening and how to participate. I did want to mention that we do have an ability now for you to book time with each individual board member on our website. That's something you want to look into as well. I did see a hand go up from the virtual meeting. Myra, do you have a comment?
Hi, yes, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, great. I had a hard time unmuting. It kept giving me all kinds of like pop-up boxes to check.
Yeah, that's a new feature because that they added for meetings that are being recorded, just so you kind of know.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. I read this at during the last board meeting, but just wanted to read it again to help answer Andy's question. But this is in the original Vermont statute, which is 7 VSA 904A. And it's regarding small cultivators. It says, it is the intent of the General Assembly to move as much of the illegal cannabis market as possible into the regulated market for the purpose of consumer protection and public safety. It is also the intent of the General Assembly to encourage participation in the regulated cannabis market by small local farmers. In furtherance of these goals, the board shall consider policies to promote small cultivators. The board shall consider the different needs and risks of small cultivators when adopting rules and shall make an exception or accommodation to such rules for cultivators of this size where appropriate. And that's all I had to comment today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Myra. Anyone else? Public comment? Oh, okay. I will close the public comment window. And moving down the agenda, we had a few, just couple of reminders. And the first one is just about up tiering. In our most recent rule amendment, we created a rule based upon a statutory authorization to allow tier 1 and tier 2 cultivators that have kind of maxed out their capacity and are making kind of sales of their products to graduate up a tier. And the rule says that we can open a window to allow for this and then close it. And I just wanted to remind everyone that the window to close that kind of market or tier expansion graduation is you have to have a complete application in by September 1st. So that's just purely a reminder that that date is approaching. And then if anyone has questions about how to go about getting a request to tier up in, we have a FAQ document, a guidance document on our guidance library about that. Also, just a kind of reminder, just because we've been noticing this as a kind of problem as we are out in people's retail shops, that that anyone who sells purely hemp or CBD products, not cannabis products, there's a rule regarding a mandatory disclosure. It's rule 2.8.4D. It just requires kind of signage indicating that hemp products, the verbiage is in the rule, but it's hemp products are not cultivated under conditions monitored by the Cannabis Control Board and are not subject to Vermont testing requirements. That's just a statutory requirement. It's in our rules as well. It's just, there's a concern that there might be consumer confusion about what products are kind of subject to our testing requirements and what are not. So if you have any questions about that, you can send them to ccb.info.gov, but that is a just mandatory requirement. And then just another kind of PSA here, the fundamental job of one of the fundamental jobs of our agency is to make sure we know who is part of a cannabis license, and that we background check those people, we screen them for possible affiliations problems. Rule 1.17 kind of defines how this process plays out, but just want to make sure everyone's clear that before you change a principal or controller of your business, you have to seek and obtain board authorization. It's got to happen before that change is consummated. And that impacts anyone with 10% or greater equity interest in the corporation. This is really important just for our legislature, for the federal government, to make sure we have a well-regulated system, that we know who's kind of in the industry. So we've seen this kind of pop up a few times where people, bring on a new principal or owner and then ask for an amendment after the fact. It has to happen by statute, by board rule before.
That's bringing someone on and taking someone off, right?
Yeah. And again, the process is spelled out in Rule 1.17. If we notice this happening, the consequence is an immediate kind of pause to your business while we vet that person. That's kind of pretty significant for a lot of folks, especially around harvest time. Every day is important. So those are the basic reminders and updates. What we wanted to do next is give a little bit of an update on our working groups. We know that not everyone can attend these, but I'm going to start with hemp. So the first working group meeting was on August 5th. The video for that is available on our YouTube channel. So the basic premise of this meeting was just really to open the dialogue with the existing hemp processors in the state and get some clarity as to what their expectations are with respect to this looming November 12th change to the federal definition of hemp. And my hope is to use that information and kind of decide how the CCB should be approaching this new authorization that we were granted in a recent bill to reinstitute a statewide hemp program. So in that meeting, I just started with a basic overview of kind of the 2018 Farm Bill, the kind of subsequent decision at the state level to stop issuing hemp permits. And then the kind of more recent changes with the change to definition of hemp and, the 1 year delay. I reviewed the sections of Act 178 related to hemp regulation. And importantly, I talked about the flexibility that was built into that piece of legislation that's hopefully going to allow us to accommodate whatever path forward the federal government chooses. There's kind of some flexibility around the board defining what it means to be a craft processor and waiving regulations for craft processors and extending product registrations, thinking about whether this is going to be purely a Vermont marketplace or whether these products will cross state borders, both in and out of Vermont. I walked through what I think are the most likely scenarios for what may or may not happen federally. These are all just kind of informed guesses on my part that anything could happen. But I think walking through those various scenarios just highlights how tenuous the situation is for anyone who's operating in this space, including the regulators that are trying to get ahead of some of these issues. After that, I just asked some very pointed questions to the, 20 or so people that joined the meeting. Does your business model survive if this is only a Vermont marketplace? Does your business survive if you have to transition to broad spectrum products or CBD isolate products? Does your business survive if you're considered a cannabis business and you have to have increased banking and insurance costs and all these kind of product registration fees and all the rest? An important one that, if you rely on importing full spectrum CBD distillate from out of state, because we don't have a lot of current manufacturers to make CBD distillate, full spectrum distillate. If you're dependent upon ordering it from California or Oregon, what's your alternative if all of a sudden the federal government says that can't be shipped through the mail? And then, the fundamental question is, given all this federal uncertainty, how quickly should the board begin rulemaking? So what I kind of got was, there's a lot of different hemp processors. This is not a monolithic group. They're sole proprietors. There's 20, 30 person businesses. The business models look very different as to where people are sourcing their full spectrum distillate. And then there's a lot of people that sell kind of locally at farmers markets, a little bit online, mostly to Vermonters. There's people that the vast majority of their sales are out of state. So I didn't get complete uniform answers to any of those questions. I didn't expect to, but I saw some desire to set something up quickly in order to accommodate, banks or insurance companies or out-of-state regulators in the short term. But for the most part, I heard a desire to hold off kind of enshrining anything into statute or anything into rule that can't be easily changed until we have a little bit more clarity as to whether any of these products can actually legally cross state lines or be shipped through the mail. And also the kind of open question, if there is going to be federal regulation and federal taxation, what does that look like? And do we need to duplicate that in the state? And of course, we're already the problem also is that we're already seeing kind of hints at a short-term delay, like a 30-day delay, which is in the Senate Appropriations Continuing Resolution. That could lead, as we've seen with most continuing resolutions, to just continuous delays, continuous kicking the can down the road for years. It could be that way. So do we want to move now and just kind of hope for the best? There's a bill to regulate cannabis at the federal level. It's got some bipartisan support, but it's a complicated issue and it requires resources at the FDA or whatever regulatory body is going to take this on, and or is Congress actually going to appropriate the money for that? So anyway, what I think the best move is to call this group together again and look through the former rule that was in place at the Agency of Agriculture, see what can be preserved from that rule, carried forward to a hemp rule, what makes sense. Trying to think about it in the lens of, we have a lot of out-of-state actors that are trying to sell into Vermont, and we have in-state actors that are trying to sell out of Vermont. And then I also want to look at the food safety rules from the Department of Health to see what may be adopted from those statutes as well. But I haven't decided on a date quite yet for that one, but I think sometime in the next couple of weeks for a follow-up meeting on hemp.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Let's see. I guess we have a quick pause in the working group updates to talk about just another, basic reminder. So I'll give some context here. So I've been talking a lot, but I'll be brief here. So reminder that in our February board meeting, our regular board meeting, we voted unanimously that any hemp-derived Delta-9 distillate that was brought into the market by a prospective licensee has to be manufactured into a product by September 1st or discarded. So what this means is that effective September 1st, products that are offered for a new registration or a renewal must contain only THC sourced from Vermont cultivated cannabis plants. And the licensed cannabis establishment may not have or use any hemp-derived THC distillates or other hemp distillates that meet Vermont's statutory definition of cannabis. That all THC in registered products must be derived from lawfully grown cannabis grown by a board licensed cultivator. I think at the following meeting, we kind of clarified about non-hemp derived cannabinoids. So I'll quickly just mention that. We did allow a waiver to our rule around products being entered into the market with respect to CBD, CBG, CBC, CBN, and THCV. So we said that those could be sourced from hemp, so long as the facility that is kind of creating those isolates is manufactured in a current good manufacturing practice facility, that the lab that they were tested in is either licensed by the CCB or is ISO 17025D accredited, and that we have a COA from one of those two labs, and that the label accurately reflects the additive contents, how much is in there. So this applies, again, the February decision applies to hemp-derived Delta-9. It doesn't apply to the kind of those 5 hemp-derived cannabinoids.
Is that right?
Yes. All right. Now, back to the work group updates. Kyle, I think you're up next on retail siting.
Yeah, sure. So we had our first retail siting work group meeting on July 22nd. I think I gave a quick update at our July board meeting. You know, people brought a lot of thoughts, opinions, stories to share to that meeting. Some of it was more productive than others, given the task at hand. And I think at the last meeting, I said, I'm trying to figure out the best path forward for this work group to kind of dig into the substance. And just reminding folks, the authorization for retail siting that we do have is 7 VSA 881A5F says location or siting requirements that increase the geographic distribution of new cannabis retail establishments based on population and market needs. Those two words in and of themselves could mean something different to two different people, two different license types, to the board, to the retail community, to the cultivator community, so have you. What I ended up doing after that meeting was developing some questions that I really wanted the working group participants to dig into. And it was a broad suite of questions to kind of understand your thoughts on the market for cultivators, how far are you traveling to sell your product, like some of the comments we heard earlier today. What are the price points you're getting for retailers? What do you anticipate, your catchment area is? How far are consumers, traveling to your store? Questions like this that really kind of get at how we think about Vermont and its quirky, rural nature and how consumers are acting as it relates to purchasing retail cannabis. There was actually a lot of good feedback that I received. And what I ended up doing is taking that feedback with two major question umbrellas in mind and split the work group into two sub work groups. One was focused on consumer access. We've heard a lot of folks that lose customers to the Massachusetts southern border, or New Hampshire residents coming to Vermont to, spend at a Vermont retail. How far are folks traveling if, they're in a more rural part of the state? Is it based off of specific products that are being offered, specific businesses that are being offered at specific retailers, you name it. The other one was about cultivator access, because one of the things that became pretty evident in the answers that I received at the small cultivators, and there is this 904A language that we should be always thinking about incorporating into all of our decision making. If you're a small cultivator trying to do it all, and I certainly recognize how hard that must be, I wanted to dig into, are you selling to folks just in your neighborhood? Are you crisscrossing the state? Is it some combination of the two of those? Like, how are you selecting, and also talking with retailers about how you sell your product, where you sell your product, how often you're being asked by retailers to come back, trying to get on the same page there. And I didn't split the work groups based strictly on license type. We had some wonderful retailers that came to the cultivator access one, even if it feels like, why am I here? I think hearing the stories of how retailers recruit cultivators in their neck of the woods, how they talk with retailers in their neck of the woods, what prompts them to want to bring in a brand that's further away into their specific retail store. That was all really informative feedback, I think, for everybody in that working group. Consumer working group might feel like it was the more appropriate place for some retailers, and I can understand that. And it was really a lot about, what is consumer behavior as it relates to retail, and how do you feel about, what is healthy competition? It's a major theme that I think we're working through with both of these work groups. What I ended up doing was presenting a number of different potential options and pathways that we could work through as it relates to kind of approaching retail siting. One that's municipally driven, X amount of retail stores in a given municipal boundary that has opted in, splitting the state into specific regions, 5 or 6 different regions based off of consumer behavior, grouping it by population. Drive time, I think drive time is better than mileage, considering, you might live 8 miles from somewhere in Vermont and it takes 50 minutes to get there. And then the last option was taking the best components of the other ones and trying to find something that actually works for how unique and rural the state is. And I gave both working groups a worksheet, some homework. We all have homework. and asked to take this presentation and look at those options through different criteria lenses. Predictability for applicants. Let's say you're a prospective new retailer, you know that you can have 2 stores in a given municipality. There's only 1 there. You know that that option is available to you. That might be, and if you're scoring this 1 through 5, that might be a strong fit for just knowing what you're up against. You know, the more complicated this becomes and the more willingness you're gonna have to go and defend why this town is the best fit for you. That's arguably weaker as far as predictability for, you know, how you're going to know whether or not you're going to get the affirmative or the negative as it relates to board approval. Reflects consumer behavior. I live in a town of a couple hundred people and there's no grocery store. Like, a municipal boundary doesn't fit well, you know, from that consideration. Like in Vermont, we're moving into kind of nuclear areas as consumers. Protects against overconcentration, improves consumer access, or improves, improves cultivator access or improves consumer access, depending on which work group you were in. Accounts for neighboring towns, whether they've opted in or haven't opted in. Administrative feasibility. Because at the end of the day, we've still got to make sure that we can appropriately regulate any new retail or relocation. And adaptability over time. What if there are changes at the state level, changes at the federal level, a new town opts in, cannabis is all of a sudden, you know, federally legal? What if the population of Vermont changes? What if all of a sudden tourism dries up like a COVID situation? You know, all these kind of ways that you know, we can really ground something in a way that accounts for both now and what this is going to look like 10 years down the road. And so actually, I got a lot of really great feedback. People were able to kind of score on the worksheet. I had a couple follow-up questions for some folks that kind of led into, you know, what would make a productive use of the next work group meeting. People had until last Friday to give me answers. And so I'm still kind of working through, kind of crunching some numbers, seeing where, no matter your license type, we all agree that this is a 5 or this is a 1. And how can we start really drilling into it? This is where everybody feels like they're on the same page. And so the next meeting, and I think I've got a date in mid-September circled, but I don't want to announce that quite yet. Let's bring the full work group back together and kind of, you know, identify some trends and some themes that I've heard from both subgroups, and you know, really get closer to an understanding of where, no matter your license type, this is what makes the most practical and logical sense, and giving the board that direction to kind of really understand what is going to be the best way to move forward from a structural rule perspective.
That's great. Yeah, it's a really challenging issue. I know it feels like people are being pitted against themselves in this existential situation. Did you talk at all about a local veto? I mean, that was something that when we drafted our initial rule, that we didn't end up, you know, we ended up pulling. We struggled with that. Like,
Yeah.
The town, like a Burlington, has 12 already, but they're okay with having a 13th.
So in the initial question suite that I had for the initial work group, I think folks were a little weary of too much local control. And I heard everything from, hey, I'm in a small town, there's already one in town, and that person knows the select board will ever get a fair shake, which, you know, unfortunately happens in other ways all the time across the country. And I think, you know, people thought that the board had a better understanding of the complexities here and didn't feel like they wanted too much more local control and would rather, you know, work through the board that has the kind of more quote unquote expertise. I hate that word sometimes, but, you know, and not put another layer of bureaucratic green lighting, you know, onto the path to securing a new retail. But I certainly think it's something we should consider. I think it gets a little blurry when, you know, I think right now people really like the regional idea more so than the municipal stuff. So as we move towards more of these regions, like we might hear about in your events update, how does the local approval complement this regional component? If, you know, it's the person in one specific town and we're thinking about this regionally, like how does it kind of work? I think so. Just what I've heard.
Yeah. I mean, the other question that I have is we're all thinking about retail in one way because we have one retail license. But from our very first legislative report, we talked about having limited retail, like a limited number of products available behind the shelf at a general store. Like they sell lottery tickets or they sell tobacco products.
Yeah, I think, and I asked some of those questions. I think there was some interest if it was done the right way. I think there's some fear amongst cultivators who don't have a retail license that if we create like a less expensive, and this isn't necessarily what you're referring to, but let's say you created a tier of retail where you could just sell your own products. Would that compound some issues around vertical integration that make it more challenging for the folks that have a small cultivator license that can't afford to buy or can't afford to kind of get their own retail license and then move them further away from, finding shelf space at a new retail location. So I think there's opportunities to do something like that if it's done the right way. But I think there are some folks out there that have some concerns at the same time. We would need a fee and stuff like that too. It doesn't mean we can't build the structure and hope for a fee bill at the legislature. But I did talk about tiers of retail and where are folks' concerns, and I did that a lot with a lot of one-off conversations that I've had since I've been poking around this issue.
Questions? For
No,
Donna?
that's
All right. So another larger meeting forthcoming.
Yes, we're going to bring the full work group back together and just present the results. And I'm also doing the equivalency meeting next Wednesday, building that slide deck at the same time, which is why I just haven't been able to kind of crunch the numbers like I want to with this work group. But we're going to get something on the books for mid-September, so be on the lookout.
All right. I think next is back to me on the event permit work group update. So this was the second meeting. And the video is available on our YouTube channel. So I started by just updating the working group on some of the conversations I had had since the prior meeting. That was with the New York Office of Cannabis Management, who has been doing event licensing that this legislation was based off of since 2023, I believe. And just some of the best practices, lessons learned from that agency. We're only allowed to give out 10 of these a year. So, it's very likely that we'll do that through a lottery system just for the sake of kind of fairness. So I talked to two state licensing directors that have done a lottery for licenses, both Connecticut and Missouri. And they had very different approaches to how they held that. But they also had a lot of lessons learned for me. So it was great. I also talked to a couple of insurance brokers and insurance underwriters about how much it might cost to insure an event, whether that's even feasible. And got some decent information that I shared out with that group. No one was willing to commit to a kind of specific dollar amount for an insurance policy because it's highly contingent upon the person, their track record with their insurance company, the nature of the event, the logistics of the event. But I think it's fair to say it'll be at least $1,500 for a single day of event for a 1 million per occurrence, 2 million aggregate general liability policy.
What's the attachment point for it? Like 1 million is the coverage. What's the point that is there like a deductible? What is that before they? Okay.
Yeah, but
because it just adds to the liability, right?
Right. And I would say that's probably on the low end for a
Mhm.
very standard event. Doesn't include consumption. It has a single point of access, limited number of products. So I also then kind of turned to what I thought a fair process for awarding permits by lottery might look like. It includes kind of an initial application window where people could submit the basic information about how their proposed event might operate. You know, what sort of products they're going to be, how many attendees they expect, is it in coordination with a larger event, you know, just some very kind of basic information. And then the board would do an internal review for eligibility and feasibility. Then we hold a lottery that takes into account geographic distribution. Anyone who is awarded, anyone who wins that lottery will be granted a conditional permit that will be valid for some span of time. You know, I propose maybe 6 months because, you know, things on the ground may change. You may, you know, this, you know, you just don't know. You essentially would have 6 months to actually carry out the event. At least 45 days prior to the actual event date, you would have to apply to convert your conditional permit into a final permit. That would include the local approval, which is mandated by the statute, a complete application, paying that, I think it's $500 application fee. So all the kind of necessary steps to actually do the event. And then, yeah, we would do kind of a pre-event walkthrough, post-event debrief, try and learn some lessons from each event. I think there was questions about, well, if you can only do 10 in a year, should you do 5 in the initial lottery and 5 and, you know, kind of pause and learn some lessons, maybe update the procedures after the fact, you know, based upon lessons learned, and then do another lottery for the next 5. There's some lingering questions in my mind about how we should think about NECAN and 420. I assume that we might get a lot of applications for a 420 event. You know, and if we do 5 or 10 and they're all on 420, our staff might be stretched kind of thin. And the whole point of this is to demonstrate that we can do this successfully and that we're, you know, we don't have any whatever fears the legislature is worried about, that they don't occur. And, you know, I don't know if we need to have kind of like a blackout date for 420 so that we don't accept any applications that for the same date. And then NECAN, you know, just as its own. I also feel like we'll have a number of events or permits just for NECAN.
The week is full.
420 is on a Tuesday, so it would probably be the weekend before would be my guess, but
NECAN would require multiple permits versus for
NECAN,
every retailer, there would have to be a permit, right?
I think we have flexibility there.
Okay.
I think we could do, theoretically, we could do 1 permit. Well, I should say, NECAN's a 2-day event, and these permits are only good for 24 hours. So it may be that we'd have to do 2, or theoretically, we could do potentially 10 for NECAN. And then it would just be the 10 people that are there. But then you have 10 different points of sale systems. You got 10 different access points. To me, it just makes a lot more sense to have 1 for NECAN. But again, like NECAN is a special case. Like what we saw last year, the hesitation that we have is that last year we had product on display and there was times when we didn't have access to the site, which is not true of any other cannabis establishment. So the fact that we don't have site control at NECAN can be very challenging when we're having sales occur.
Could we address that in our procedures though? Like it's a condition of the permit, having the site control? I mean, that seems
We
like we
can,
would
but
have to do that
the
anyway.
licensees can't guarantee it because they're not running NECAN.
It's like the hotel or conference center plus the NECAN organizers themselves as an organization.
Right. And then
there's a licensee.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you still might have that with a, like the venue control will be an issue regardless if it's at a venue, but yeah.
Anyway, yeah, there's some challenges there. My hope is to hold our next meeting on September 16th. And, you know, if we don't get moving, I mean, we don't, the stakes aren't quite as high as they were in Massachusetts or Missouri and Connecticut because they were issuing actual limited licenses. These are permit licenses, event permits, but they took 14 months to set up their lottery alone. And so we don't have that kind of time here. So,
But if we could like issue some permits before the end of the calendar year, that could happen in 2027 theoretically.
Right.
And we aren't going to lose out on any opportunities as far as being able to hand out a certain number.
Right. Yeah. So my hope, Gabe has kind of put together an outline of all of the areas of procedures that we need to address. And I've been kind of plugging in some information there. And so my hope is to actually have a set of draft procedures for the working group to look at on September 16th and hopefully get some feedback before we actually go through the formal procedure making process. So yeah, that's my plan. September 9th, September 16th. Haven't finalized that with internally yet, but I think that's the date I'm targeting.
That's the date I'm targeting for the next retail meeting as well. So it's going to be a fun day.
Mid-month that Wednesday,
Mid-month,
so we
okay.
may
More
need
the
to,
merrier.
or we can discuss.
Meeting a palooza.
Yeah. All right. Next up is the rescheduling.
Yes, so we met last week, 19th, that was last week, right? So much has happened, such a short period of time. And it was a relatively small group, but we talked about, well, I kind of did the table setting, right? Went through the sort of timeline of how we got to where we are today. I will skip that for everybody's sanity today. But the bulk of the meeting intentionally was about, what are the stakeholder concerns? What are the issues that folks in the industry in Vermont need the board to be following closest so that we can, direct our attention to the things that, are bubbling to the surface as decisions get made, as things change, as they get put off, whatever it is that happens next. So the concerns, I don't think there'll be any surprises here, but the concerns that were chiefly shared were, banking and taxes and 280E implications, right? How is that going to apply and to whom? Will the agencies, will the DEA communicate with the Department of Taxes? Will those things go back and forth? How will someone know all of those things that you can expect folks to be worried about? And then how will this affect the patients and the caregivers? What will that mean for them in the future? What will this kind of new system mean for them? There's a lot of questions around, whether or not DEA registrants can continue to do business with non-DEA registrants if they can now, if they can only be between DEA registrants, all of those types of concerns, including, how will genetics and seeds work in this new space? We know that the DEA has said medical products, but they haven't told us exactly what a medical product is. So all of the concerns that we've sort of been talking about that kind of started, in the meeting that we had in Essex, still the concerns that folks have today. Everyone seems to be following or have followed the hearings very closely. And I'm sure when there's a result, that'll be followed very closely too. The other was, how will we know when the DEA starts inspections? And we know that they've started in some states. In some states, it sounds like DEA has reached out to the state regulators beforehand. It's not certain if that will happen. I did share with this group that Gabe and I have made contact with the DEA. We had a nice cordial meeting with them just to sort of make sure that we keep that door open for communication as things change and move forward. And then the conversation really shifted to the medical program, because whatever happens next will affect the medical program. And so there was, all the same concerns that we've heard about patient access and how things might change, what will happen with people who are duly licensed in the MUE and in adult use, and how that will be applied. I think that we've heard this in our public meetings before, but there was also, a lot of concern around the ability to produce the medical products and be able to stay financially viable producing those products. And that, of course, raises concerns about patient access and the ability to access those products. So I don't think I'm sharing any surprises. I do feel like I'm depressing people, but there's a lot that could shift and change. And I think the importance of this particular work group is having an open door of communication so that when licensees are getting communicated with whatever federal agency is, doing their work with whatever information they're getting and the information we're getting. And so we have a place to share that. That's the main goal there. And so that's what we started with, is that sort of sharing. So we're going to meet again in a month. I'm thinking September 23rd, like the end of every month. Knowing that if something changes and we need to have a meeting sooner, we can do that. And yeah, if there's, I mean, what we know, you will know when we know it. There's still a lot, like we don't have any guidance, and we talked about that. There's not a lot of guidance on what the products are, how to interpret them. One of the other concerns that I think we've heard in multiple venues is, you know, what happens to Vermont products when, if and when this means that out-of-state products can come into the state of Vermont. And we talked about the role of product registration and the role that that will play regardless, because that's how we have it set up now. So that was like an hour
Yeah.
in like 30 seconds. But you know, it's, there's more to come. And we talked about the different sort of legal paths that could happen, the different kinds of lawsuits that could come up, the delays, all those types of things as well.
The registration seems like a critical point of this,
Yes.
but I just want to make sure I'm totally clear. The DEA has not given any indication, to us at least, what it means to be registered with the DEA.
So when we spoke with the DEA at the time, their interpretation was medical products is medical only. Now, we don't know what will happen as a result of the hearings. So, and I think that there's still we don't know what the interpretation of the sort of like dual license will be. They cautioned and they wanted folks to know that if you register and the determination isn't that MUE is also medical, that you don't get just like if you pay a licensing fee to the state, you don't get that money back. So they were actually really concerned about people paying into this, registering, and maybe not getting their money back if their registration doesn't go through. So they wanted us to communicate that out, and we did. I did do that in this meeting. It's also a choice, right? It's a choice someone can make. It doesn't mean you can't do it, just something they wanted to warn people about.
And they're only registering retail currently.
Yeah.
Although the order applies to anyone who manufactures or distributes.
Yeah.
So that would include manufacturers and wholesalers under our system.
I think it's only retail so far that I am aware of that have applied.
Yep.
And if you have applied, if you could email me, it's great for us to be able to keep track of. So when we get information, we know who to communicate with. If you've registered with the DEA or you're planning to do so, please just email me to my direct email address, julie.hulbert@vermont.gov.
That registration, was it $700, $500, $700?
I think it's $500.
They just haven't communicated out, either our local or at the national, as far as you're aware, as to what that registration means for the state.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Still seems like every state is reporting different interactions with the DEA.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's managed regionally, but also every state has done this differently, right? So like Oklahoma, for example, the whole thing is essentially medical. So the approach there is different than it would be in Vermont or Massachusetts or places that have dual licenses. So they're trying to figure it out just like we are. Do you have anything? Because you and I met with the DEA. Do you want to add anything?
I mean, we learned a lot.
We did.
There was some discordance between what we were hearing and sort of the zeitgeist out there.
Yeah.
I think out in the marketplace, people see 280E relief and run at it because that tax treatment is so harmful to them. It seemed clear to me, and I think we're all getting that message now, that DEA is a large federal agency with a long history of administering the Controlled Substance Act that's half a century old. And from their point of view, and I think the point of view of federal law, whatever comes of this is going to have to fit into the CSA model. The CSA model is not going to be adapted to cannabis. It's going to be the other way around. And as we've all seen, that has led to some unusual things we can already see in DEA publications and federal publications where there's almost an expectation that there will be a prescriber with like a DEA number.
Mhm.
And it's sort of like, that isn't how this works at all. That isn't how, when you register as a patient, your physician or physician assistant is not prescribing cannabis. They're saying you have one of these statutorily defined diagnoses. And that's true of all the states. So, and they've just got a lot to deal with because these programs are so heterogeneous among the states. So it only makes sense if you're in a different state, you're hearing a different thing because you're starting from a different place.
Yeah.
They've been very helpful. And I think, but everybody, the message as I understood it was maybe slow down, take your time, let some of these things settle. Because there is, as you said, a real risk that people invest time and thought and fees in pursuing a registration only to learn later that it will not be possible to have a foot in both worlds. But ultimately, as everybody said, that's a question for people's individual attorneys and business decisions.
Yeah.
A sneaky suspicion of litigation, for better or worse, is going to slow some parts of it down.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. But we have our finger on the pulse
Sure.
Yeah.
of whatever that is.
And then, recreational rescheduling is trundling along through the conventional notice and comment rulemaking. And if that goes through and everything is Schedule 3, we won't have to worry about this distinction, but it'll still be a big change.
But we'll have other things to worry about.
There's always something to worry about.
Yeah, so on the broader rescheduling, the recreational rescheduling, the window to correct the record has now closed.
Yep.
They've released the transcript of all of the
It was supposed to be today. Did they do
I
that?
think so.
Yeah. And the only thing that I've heard, and this is completely just not based upon anything other than people's instincts, is that the judge is going to move fast as to whether or not the DEA can move forward with rescheduling.
That's what I would agree.
Yes.
That
And
would be my
fast
guess, too.
is a subjective term. I think our Regulators Association expected something within 30 days, but who knows? It's impossible.
Yeah,
That's a
he
guess.
does have to he does have to review all the drafts and the
3,000
corrected
pages, yeah.
transcript and
Yeah, it was supposed to come out today.
Yeah.
Right.
and the corrected transcript was only correcting. They weren't allowed to add
Yeah.
or
Right.
yeah.
All right. Well, again, yeah, I guess you'll convene again in a month, and unless something dramatic happens in the interim. Great. Okay, just moving down the agenda then, the discussion and vote around the updated advertising guidance. Again, we published this last month, asked for any comments from any impacted businesses. It sounds like we didn't get any. We didn't receive any comments or any suggested edits. So I think you guys removed the section on AI. No?
Why?
That is up to you guys. We didn't, but there was live discussion about whether it isn't just redundant and saying follow the rules with respect to AI. So we'll follow your directions on whether you think it is duplicative or helpful.
So I do think it's a little duplicative. My only thought is if we address, I'll take your guidance on this, Gabe, but if we address AI, then, are we going to have to address every new advertising tool in guidance, or is that blanket guidance it really already does cover anything that could come up, right? Okay. I just don't want you to have to write new guidance every time, like whatever comes next after AI,
Yeah, the only thing that was really novel to AI that was this idea of brand bashing, where other people's brands get changed. So that is genuinely novel. The rest of it is basically the same principles everybody already knows.
I'm fine with leaving it in. Again, sometimes more words is more confusing than fewer words. You're not allowed to use AI to the extent that it's misleading, but it's already true of any form of communication.
Yeah.
Any advertisement. But I'm fine with leaving it in, just to maybe put a fence post to people, a reminder to people that, hey, if you used AI, make sure that it didn't create something that's not real.
Read it after you use the tool.
And to your point about not more words not necessarily helping, one way we can avoid just this Christmas tree effect is when we go in to edit, don't just add. We should all ask ourselves, what can we take out now?
Yeah. Well, that's good.
All right. Well, I'm glad. appreciate you guys willing to take a 30-day pause on that. The advertising guidance in particular is, a sensitive topic. But I'm happy to, at this point, I don't think, do we even have to approve it? I think we said we approve it subject to a
Yeah,
30-day comment period.
I feel, I don't remember if that.
It's
how
love
we-
emotion.
Okay, all right. Julie, if you have one,
I move that we approve the updated advertising guidance for publication.
second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Discussion regarding protecting data privacy. Is this one that Gabe can help us with?
Yeah, that's a follow-up, right?
Yes, I can. I've locked myself out of the thing I'm going to be referring to. Here we go. Too many windows. So this was a sort of a continuation of a conversation that was begun at your last meeting that really relates to your Consumer Privacy Rule 2.8.3 and subdivisions D and E of that rule enact a very blunt prohibition on unauthorized or unconsented to collection of consumer data. And they're so short I can read them. They say a retailer may not acquire or record visitor personal information other than information typically required by a retail transaction, which can include information to determine the visitor's age. And then second, a retailer may not record or retain any additional personal information from a visitor without the visitor's permission. That leaves a little bit to the imagination in terms of what is typical of a retail transaction, as well as how the permission would be obtained. But where the rubber hit the road in terms of this coming up for conversation was we had a few external complaints and a few internal concerns that it is quite obvious that when one has a ID scanned at most people that have integrated e-commerce POS systems, that they're being data-based, that it is not just, I don't say this across the board, but probably more establishments than not are integrating the scanning with consumer tracking and a creation of a consumer profile that can be very useful. It's not necessarily nefarious. So, sometimes helpful if the bartender can see what are your favorite products, what did you buy before, what were you unhappy with. That on one hand is a good way to serve consumers, but that isn't really the point. The rule says the consumer is entitled to know that's being done and should consent to it before it is done. And I think a couple of the complaints that we'd received from the consumer public was, hey, I went in, I was told you have to have your ID scanned and then blip, blip, bleep, and then all my stuff's on the screen. And so I think there's a broader conversation to be had that can't be had at today's meeting about how these processes work. We're in the middle of learning about that. I spoke with the dominant vendor who were very helpful in just explaining how their systems work and what the options for integrations are and what can be switched on and off in terms of consumer privacy. So this probably requires attention in rulemaking. Right now, the rule says what it says, and that's the one we're bound to enforce. And the simplest way for a retailer to ensure that the retailer is compliant with the rule is to make sure that the consumer has consented in a way they actually understand to the creation of a profile. In my opinion, a retailer is at liberty to run their business in such a way where they say, if you want to shop here, you're going to have a profile. And if you walk in, you consent to that. If you don't like that, go somewhere else. The problem is they must tell the consumer that. The consumer can't be led to be unaware that they're getting a consumer profile and have one built. So I think more to come on that. But right now, I think the big solution, the simplest solution, is just clear consumer disclosure at the point of sale or at the point of scanning. It's where that record is created and the information is collected that matters. So if I go in, I get database, but I don't ultimately make a purchase, I'd be extra mad that I didn't know. So if you're taking the information and integrating at the point of scanning, tell them at the point of scanning. So most of that is common sense, consent and consumer information to the consumer and their consent.
Just to confirm, didn't you also find out that our POS providers can set up their systems in such a way that it's scan only, and that is a path forward for
switching may solve this problem. We don't know enough about the technical details. For example, unanswered right now in a formal way is if you flip the switch, when I say that, I mean, if you select a system that doesn't integrate, just does the VeriSign check, but doesn't integrate, are you blinding your business to that information, or are you preventing the actual collection? Because if you're just blinding yourself and you're sending that information to a data broker anyway, then that might not help.
Yeah.
And so, and I don't want to suggest nefarious things so much as to say we don't know.
Yeah.
But when we get into more detail, it may be possible to give advice to retailers about here's what would be appropriate to switch on and off if you want this kind of disclosure. But right now, simply clear warning to the consumer would keep everybody above board, and is probably the best we can do right now. There is a related issue about e-commerce apps, because the same e-commerce platforms and integrations do allow retailers often to purchase as sort of an accessory to the package, a branded app, and encourage consumers to buy it. Our advertising laws and rules really didn't anticipate this. And the challenge with it is that the app could mean a lot of things. On one hand, it could just be a way to view what's already on your website. On the other, though, it can be algorithm or AI-driven bespoke advice to the consumer. At one extreme, like an AI bud tender that listens to your complaints and recommends products, we don't know what to say, you know what I mean? And so I think this has been a concern for a number of states. I think the providers understand this, and that it's something that has to be tuned up. The question that people really wanted a weather report, not necessarily a motion from you on, is a handful have apps, and they sort of want to know, can we use these and to what extent, and are there rules around them? At this point, unfortunately, I mean, my assessment is it isn't possible for the board to conclude in the pre-publication review that material presented to the customer through those apps is going to be compliant. We just don't know enough about it. That doesn't mean it's a problem for all time, so much as that it's going to be very, very difficult right now for somebody who has chosen to have their retail establishment advertised through an app to make the required showings that there are no health claims, for example, or that they're actually getting the content that the consumer's encountering pre-approved. That showing just is very, very hard to make because these things are so new. So that's really all. I think the people that were interested in these apps sort of want a weather report. They want to know what's going on. For the immediate future, it feels gloomy in the sense that it's just going to be very hard. It's going to be a lot of work to make that showing. People could collect information. We are going to be collecting information. We've spoken with only one of 5 total, I think, vendors that have systems like this. They're not all identical. So we're going to work as fast as we can to learn what we can, but I had promised a couple of people that were hanging on very graciously for some guidance about apps that we'd talk with you about it and at least get the conversation started.
So it seems to me like from what you said, there's a difference between an app that brings you to a store so you can place an order that you go pick up or see what's on the menu, and something that you get like a push notification from. Okay. So that seems
or like an
different.
app that has this like chat AI
Right,
bot
where there is something a step above just here's the menu and I'm placing my order, right?
Or, you've crossed into Bristol now, you know what I mean? Because you can geolocate somebody, are you going to be tagged?
Yes.
You've been so many days without a purchase, or
like Waze.
Yeah, I took it off my phone. but yeah, same thing. I mean, it's just a lot of capabilities that sit awkwardly with the requirements as they exist.
I mean, like from my perspective, if it's literally just to make it so that somebody could place an order, that's one thing. If there is anything more than that, does feel like an advertisement that we would have to know more about, and they'd be able to have to meet all the standards that we have for advertisements.
Like you'd have to train the AI bot on state-specific regulations and then make sure that nothing's gone haywire.
It depends on what the limitations of it are. If the AI bot just makes it easier for you to say, does this place carry this product? Some of them are like that, right? But if it says, if you put in the AI bot, I feel this way, what should I buy? That's different. Right?
Yeah, totally.
I have a splitting headache,
Right, that's very different.
Do we know whether these apps, any of them, either the kind of more advanced one or just the like shortcut to a menu, are collecting data?
We don't, but it's fair to infer. One of the, and not necessarily with the awareness of the stores that have chosen to use them, but really the reason in general that folks across the marketplace are pushing you to their app is they're limited in what they can collect through a browser. But once you've made the choice to download the app, you've given up a lot more integration with your phone and whatnot. So it's a tangled mess. And so now it's just sort of like, well, can we approve them for advertising? And unfortunately, it's looking from the advertising committee's perspective like it's real hard to see how these square.
But even a website, I mean, while the retailer, for example, might not be collecting data, that data is being collected, right?
Sure.
Yeah,
The fact that you visited the website is being collected.
it is.
By the host, yeah.
They usually have those cookie notifications
Yes.
now. Yeah, I'm wondering if that's involved here, like a end user licensing agreement on these apps. I mean, are we talking about just a very narrow set of apps right now? Or is it just, or there just a proliferation?
For the most part, I think they're all associated with the known vendors.
Okay.
You know, that's generally who's putting the effort and capital into developing them as an offering. It's possible there are others out there. We don't know about them, but I mean, the big question is sort of, is this a vehicle through which compliant advertising can be done? And today it's hard to see.
Yeah, again, I don't mind a shortcut to a menu, but I would like the consumer to know whether that app is also collecting all of your data at
Yeah.
the same time.
And I think we need to know what kind of information it's
The obvious
sharing.
question sort of is if it's just another way to view the website, why do you need it? What's it doing?
Oh, it's just easier to get to. Just, I could have.
I've got the legislative
Tell you about
app
my
on my
life and why
phone.
I use apps.
Yeah.
They're spying on you. Watch out. So,
Okay. On the first question, the non-app question, the
Yeah.
scanning of IDs question. I mean, I read one of the licensing agreement, end user licensing agreements, and if you have a loyalty program, both the store and the point of sale system both have co-ownership of the data that's being collected pursuant to that agreement. So what sort of disclosure should be made to the customer before they decide to opt into a data collection? Both of those?
pretty much that. I mean, if you choose to interact with the system, a consumer profile will be made of you that'll be available to us and may be available to others.
Do you expect a verbal communication of that?
I think it's a bit much, to be honest. I think a conspicuous notice near the point of sale would probably make sense. That's a regulatory question for you, though. I mean, in the pharmacy world, sometimes they've said, well, that isn't enough, these click-through things. We want you to actually collect a piece of paper with the person's wet signature on it. That's a regulatory question for you guys. What constitutes an adequately recorded consent?
Seems tough to spring something out like that on people like right now. But I mean, that's for like the grocery stores. They usually require a wet signature on a piece of paper too for their programs. But yeah, but it does seem a little bit heavy-handed to just put the brakes on everything, require a new process without any comment. But
the contrary view is that rule is not unclear and it's been there since the beginning.
Yeah.
no, I agree. But I'm just saying what kind of notice is adequate for now until we.
Oh, yeah. I don't think we want to be decreeing you've got to do X, Y, or Z.
Right.
I do think that a retailer that's concerned about compliance or drawing consumer complaints about this the simplest thing I would do if I were in those shoes would be to put up something near my point of sale that explains, in good faith, what I know to be going on.
And were you saying that as a part of our rulemaking process, we could tighten up the language in that section of the rule and maybe establish some guidelines for what level of disclosure is appropriate? Because that could be taken up in a more formal way. And in the meantime, if we just issue more of a reminder to the community of the rule and a recommendation to how they could comply with posted signage and have our compliance officers in the field educating, reminding, kind of giving that level of, hey, here's your reminder. Next time I'm here, you might be in violation formally if you don't put the signage or. So we could handle it in the field until maybe rulemaking addresses that more formally.
But then we need to say that we're comfortable with the signage, not just asking, right? Otherwise, there's no way to do that compliance work.
Yes, we would need that formal, yeah.
I like the
directive.
sign because the sign guarantees that things
Mhm.
aren't getting lost in translation.
So I think, I mean, as Olga's saying, sort of what this really means is it's a signal that we need to add some nuance to that rule if this is going to be permitted. When we do rulemaking, we just take 2.8.3 and make it a little more nuanced.
Right.
One of the clever kind of things that the data folks will say back is basically, you know, you realize this contradicts your own rule about you've got to have an audit trail with the medical transactions and all this kind of stuff. And so
So what about the security collection that we do?
Yeah.
The cameras.
yes, and so I mean, it's effectively like, you know, you
We
can't
don't know
spy on
those
them, only
either.
we do
Yeah.
that, you know.
That's a third party too.
Yep. So it's not without contradiction, but I think just asking people to comply with it in good faith and telling them that putting up a sign is the
Yeah.
simplest way to do that for the time being.
Okay, so do you need a motion from us on signage?
I think that would be premature unless you feel like you have a strong feeling about that. I think that just messaging it out there. And the big message is the rules are written down, they're adopted, and they mean what they say.
Right.
And
Yep.
we don't amend them with our mouth.
This is a guidance matter, right? Like
It's an interpretation guidance matter. You got to be pretty far out there, I think, to pick up a violation, but it is possible. And we do have irritated consumers writing in and saying, hey, I don't like this. And if that happens, it could result in a
Yeah.
violation.
Then on the app question, just,
I think we need more information
Yeah.
on that. I think we're
Also premature. I think I told the person who was very graciously waiting for us, we'd kind of try to give a weather report and take your temperature on it. It seems coming.
all right, so in between now and our next regular board meeting, we can try and really dig into the apps that are out there, what they're collecting, the kind of AI chatbot version of it, what that's collecting, what sort of statements that they're making. Are they recommending specific products? You know,
Yeah, and Liz, our data expert, has shared her contacts, and we'll try to get in touch with some of the other vendors. The one vendor that we did speak with was really an open book, very helpful about, wanting us to understand how things work.
okay, great. Perfect. All right, Olga, we're moving to you now.
Moving on.
Executive
Yes.
Director Report and staff recommendations for licensure. Licensure.
All right, here we go. Our August 26, 2026 Executive Director Report. So we'll start with our licensing data as usual, and all of this data is through August 17th. The familiar chart showing trends in our active licensee counts over the last 2 years. We are at 541 total, reflecting a gain of 1 over a month ago. Overall, we are at about 96% compared to our numbers from 2 years ago. But we are watching the attrition rate, which seems to be slowing down a bit. So we'll see if the licensure numbers continue to stabilize over the coming months, if this trend continues. Moving on. So that's our active licenses broken down by type across the most recent 3 months. August data is in blue. As you've seen in the prior months, we are showing no changes in retail, propagator, wholesaler, or lab categories. And the small changes impact cultivator and manufacturing licensees again. Otherwise, things are looking rather stable months over months. A quick look at the pie chart showing active licenses through the lens of their priority status. No changes here, months over months. Now looking at our cultivators only, broken down by type and tier. Again, 3 months worth of data here. Blue color is for August. And as you can see, months over months, the changes are concentrated among tier 1 cultivators only. There is some nuance here, so I'll highlight a few things. For August, we are reporting 2 tier 1 mixed cultivators and one tier 1 outdoor cultivator move into the indoor tier 1 category. So we've had a shift. We also had a reinstated tier 1 cultivator to include. So overall, we are reporting 3 relinquishments for the month of August, 2 indoor and 1 outdoor, all tier 1s. So again, some shifting and 3 relinquishments for the month. So that's what we got here for you. So you're seeing the gain in indoor tier 1 from 110 to 112. Okay. Quick look at our manufacturing data. We have 94 total manufacturers right now. Month over month, our changes are in tier 2. We got 1 reinstatement and we gained 2 new tier 2 manufacturers. No changes in tier 1 or tier 3 months over months. So that's the numbers we got here. Just a quick look at the canopy capacity and utilization rates right here. Not much change months over months, very minor. Total amount of licensed canopy for August is 798,000 square feet, just a little bit over to what we reported last month. And again, the gap between indoor and outdoor capacity continues to remain very narrow. But again, no significant changes to report. And same here. That's our canopy utilization slide. Numbers are steady months over months with indoor cultivation. That includes the indoor portion associated with mixed licenses being at about 35% of available canopy in use, and outdoor utilization rate is at about 50%. So again, no changes here, pretty stable. Next is just a quick look at the relinquishments. As I mentioned, we had 3. And in the chart to your left, you could see that we are reporting 2 standard and 1 social equity licensee exiting the market, as shown in orange and blue colors. And then to the right, those same 3 licensees are presented as based on their tiers and types. So those would be 3 tier 1 cultivators. Okay. A quick look at the reasons for relinquishment collected from those 3 businesses. And again, businesses often identify multiple contributing factors, and we try to capture all of them during their exit interviews. So you could see it here. So that's what we got for those numbers for you. Now we'll look at the compliance and enforcement data. In August, our team conducted 73 inspections, both scheduled and unannounced. They visited every type of a licensed establishment. We also had reported 7 targeted investigative visits to for the month of August. Those are in red. Next, just a closer look at just the, I think those are, yes, our inspections visits. And again, 73 total, majority of our inspections being with cultivators to reflect the seasonality of the work. Plus, of course, other businesses have seen our inspectors, including 15 visits with retailers and 14 with manufacturers. And now looking at the investigative visits, you could see that we focused on manufacturing primarily with 4 visits to our manufacturers, 2 cultivation visits, and 1 retail investigative visit in August. Now we'll look into the new investigations data. So we had 16 new investigations initiated in August. So you could see a lot of information here. So again, as a reminder, each color represents a different license category. So yellow reflects our manufacturer investigations, green represents cultivators, red retailers, and gray here is related to the employee ID card holders. A reminder, I think I mentioned it last time, that a single licensee may have multiple different investigations opened against them. So as a result, the 16 investigations do not necessarily represent 16 different licenses. So like in this case, the two investigations involving employee ID card holders may or may not be connected to something that's happening with the licensee to whom they are or were affiliated. And at a glance, we are seeing that our retailers and cultivators accounted for the largest share of new investigations this month, 5 involving retailers and 6 involving cultivators. So again, that's what we got for you for numbers for August.
Thank you.
Yep. And now taking a look at the additional enforcement actions. So again, blue color is for August. We got 19 recorded complaints, issued 4 notices of violation, oversaw 6 product destructions, and documented 3 cessations of operations over the course of the month. Okay. Moving on, we'll just take a closer look at the complaints that we received. You could see here that the internal audit and business operations complaints were the 2 most common categories during our reporting period. I think I mentioned before, but I'll remind you that in terms of complaints related to business operations, those typically involve age verification complaints, alleged embezzlement, on-site consumptions, retailers accepting paper IDs, and violations of one-license rules. So things like that would be captured here. And then examples of what would fall into the internal audit category would include violations found during inspections, anything related to banking or insurance deficiencies that identified during license renewal by our licensing team, documentation, or other types of issues. So that's sort of to keep those 2 categories to give you more color on this. A quick look at our notice of violations, 4 of those, and you could see what those are all about.
Do we know, Olga, if we've seen an improvement in the pesticide issues that you've shared with us since you all did the
I will have to ask.
CCB insights? And
My-
that doesn't have to be a question you answer right now. You can answer it in the next meeting if you like.
I
I
don't
think it's a little too soon to say right
Okay.
now. Maybe over the next couple of months, we can get some data on that.
Okay.
because I think I saw 3 new investigations related to pesticides. So
It takes a while for things.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but hopefully
Okay,
we could at least get some data on how often our video was watched, and maybe it will give us
That'd be nice to know.
a reminder to all.
Good. I know we don't have the ability to take attendance, but to know if there's a correlation between people who watch it or don't watch
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
then have an issue.
Okay. That's right. Okay, so that's what we got for the compliance and enforcement data. And now I have a few slides for our medical program, actually, a little more than usual. So first, I wanted to start with noting that our medical team has been conducting an internal audit and taking a closer look at some of the numbers. So I have extra slides. But as a result of that work, we also uncovered an internal system issue that was causing patient and caregiver data to be slightly overstated because some of the expired licenses were not being reported appropriately through the system. So that's an IT issue. It's been reported as a bug. It's been worked on correctly by the vendor, and we are hearing that it should be resolved. And in the meantime, we are reporting our numbers sort of via more manual workarounds. But you will see that this month our patient count is actually about 200 lower than the last month. And that's because of that error that we caught. So again, those are the numbers that have been confirmed by our staff in a more manual way, and we're trying to fix that error. It's hard. We probably won't know when that error error got into our system. So anyway, this is not a loss of 200 patients months over months. It's just we're catching up.
This, you're confident, is the baseline.
Yes, that's where we are at. And Melissa right there spent hours confirming, yeah, that we to get that fixed, to get that identified, to have that fixed. But other work. So again, since we've done that work, we came up with a few additional points here for you, right? So we have our number of patients and caregivers on the screen. We have 38 locations currently that can serve medical patients, including 36 MUE retailers and 2 dispensaries. And I included a ratio of stores to patients just for some additional data point.
We've still seen an increase of about 500 patients. We just haven't been removing the ones whose cars have expired.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's not everybody, but there are some folks with expired cards that system just wasn't pulling, and we still don't know why those folks. So that's part of the bug that we're trying to work through. But yes, the increases in the numbers, what we've seen, 40 to 50 each month, those are consistent. Yeah. So that's this. So I got a couple more slides here because again, we've done some additional work. And I wanted to share some slides on the performance of our medical program. This is during the time period from July of 25 to June of 2026. This slide focuses on the initial applications. So you could see a total of 380 were received and processed over the course of those 12 months. Looking closer, you could see how quickly our team completed that work, with 230 out of those processed within just 1 day. Overall, our turnaround time was just under 4.5 days, and median processing time is just a day.
I remember when that number was 28 days.
Yeah. So I have to know that our wonderful Isabel, the medical program coordinator, carries the vast majority of all of this work. So I want to take a moment to recognize the amazing work she's been doing. I mean, we all are incredibly grateful for her professionalism, dedication, and commitment to our patients and caregivers, and to running this medical program so smoothly. So Isabel, thank you for all you do. Those are great numbers and amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I do have more work that she does to demonstrate. So this is a slide on renewal applications. Again, same 12 months, a total of 215 renewal applications that have been processed, 116 of those issued within 1 day. You could see the average processing time is a little higher. It's mostly because sometimes at renewal, folks assume certain documents are not needed anymore, and then we got to stage a little bit the receipt. I wanted to also flag one particularly interesting finding, that 183 of those 215 renewals were actually reinstatements, meaning that those patients' medical cards had lapsed before they returned to the medical program at some point over the last 12 months. So there seems to be a very clear connection between the availability of the MUEs and our patients returning into the program. Our data, again, thanks to Melissa and team, indicates that some of those individuals had been away from the program for over 6 years. On average, returning patients had been out of the system for approximately 2.27. So again, a lot of folks returning in the last 12 months, including those who had been gone for a while. So things are looking up for the medical program.
Yeah, I was going to say at the outset, but I just decided to pause. We are going to do a renewed patient satisfaction survey. We did this in December of 2023. Now that we have the medical use endorsement deployed, and it's been out in the field for a number of months, we want to kind of measure some of the impact of it from the patients themselves. So we're just finalizing some of the questions for that survey. But if you are a patient listening, you will eventually get a survey. It's voluntary, but the more information you share with us, the more we can continuously improve the program.
Yep, definitely. Right. And the last slide here, just to show you the locations of our retail stores with approved medical endorsements. I also wanted to flag that we are beginning to see a slowdown in the new interest in medical use endorsements. When I checked with Melissa, she noted that we did not have any additional applications in the queue awaiting processing at this time. But again, since it's been about a year since we began issuing those, this trend seems to make sense that many of the retailers who were interested from the outset have likely already completed that process. So again, we might be at those numbers and things are slowing down.
Again, thanks to the licensing team. That was a big
Yeah.
change to the medical program, which hasn't changed in a decade. And that was this first major overhaul of it.
Yeah.
And it's been very successful.
It definitely feels good. Great work, team. Okay. And I have just one additional new slide on the product and product registration. I know I reported heavily last month, but we got some additional some additional information here again, doing a little bit of a performance review of the program, and I'm trying to capture it here for you. So I'll walk you through this slide. So you're looking at a summary of the work completed over the last 2 fiscal years. So you could see in real time how the program has continued to improve. Year over year, the volume of reviews, PR reviews completed increased by the 19%. You could see it in green in the first little chart. While the first time completion rate, so that means the percentage of product registration submissions received with all required information on the first pass without the need of any follow-up, increased by 4%. So thank you to those who've helped us grow that number. We always appreciate seeing that number go up. The number, though, I'm especially excited about is our average processing time, which has decreased 20% year over year. But I guess what is kind of more importantly I want to flag is if you look at that section and you focus on at the data at the brown line, you will see the consistency in our review process. So that nearly flat line tells an important story. Also, it tells it to me that our turnaround times remain consistent from month to month, regardless of any seasonal fluctuations, field work demands, vacation schedules, any other competing priorities. And to me, I'd say that this consistent team has built an efficient and reliable process to keep this important work moving forward steadily and consistently. And again, I wanted to thank Alex first and foremost, and again, Mike and team for all that amazing work to keep that consistency going month over month. So
I feel like I remember when this was 28 days as well.
Yeah.
It's
not
great.
it anymore. Yeah.
Well, and that predictability is huge.
Yeah.
for the market, right.
Exactly. That's really, I think, critical. And I think our industry folks can rely on us doing our work in the same way. And, we take pride in that, definitely. All right. So that's what I got for product registration, and the rest, that sort of wraps up the data portion. And we are ready to
Great.
move on
Yeah,
staff
thank you.
recommendations next. All right. So we'll start with our staff recommendations for initial licensure. One manufacturing application for you today. I'll flag that this business already holds a tier 1 mixed cultivator license issued in 2023, and they're looking to add a manufacturing license, and our licensing division recommends approval.
All right. Is there a motion for that?
I move that we approve the licensure of Wicked Windy Farms LLC as a tier 1 manufacturer.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have 3 slides representing timely, regular annual renewals. So we'll start with slide number 1. Moving on to slide number 2. And final slide number 3. And our staff recommends approval for all of the licenses listed on this slide and the preceding 2.
All right. Is there a motion to approve?
I move that we approve the timely renewal applications of the establishments listed on the preceding 3 slides.
Oh, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So next is a request for issuance of a manufacturing license with an amended location. For some additional color, this business operates a cultivation, manufacturing, and retail license in St. Albans. They had secured a new building just down the road from their current location, still in St. Albans. At the June board meeting, they were approved to move their cultivation to that new location, and they're now amending their manufacturing license to move to the same location. And the licensing team recommends approval.
Great. Is there a motion to approve?
I move that we approve Mother Plant's request to amend its license location in St. Albans.
Oh, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good, thank you. So next for you, we have 7 late and now complete renewal applications. The explanatory narratives and timelines for each have been shared with the board ahead of this meeting. I'd flag that 3 of 7 were late on their last year's renewal. 1 was late on their 2024 renewal. 4 out of 7 submitted their renewal applications on or after their renewal deadline. And this is also a 3rd consecutive late renewal for 2 of the renewing businesses. So we are seeing some unfortunate patterns with a few of these licensees. I know I mentioned last month that when businesses submit their applications too close to the renewal deadline, and especially when those deadlines pass, it leaves very little opportunity to resolve outstanding issues and creates unnecessary stress on both the applicants and our limited internal resources. So I can't even stress enough to the folks listening how critical it is to submit the renewal applications with sufficient time before the renewal deadline. But in terms of those 7 licensees, at this point, our licensing division has all they need to share a favorable recommendation for renewal. That being said, it's up to the board whether to approve these applications as listed.
Any questions for Olga on these?
No questions.
You said there was a couple that had 3.
That's the 3rd for a couple of those.
Plan will be to
Yes, I think
push
our
them to compliance.
internal
or-
process is that the licensing will
I didn't know if we
refer.
had to, in a motion, kind of signal we were moving.
We might take care of that.
Okay. I'll anticipate.
All right. Is there a motion to accept and approve?
I move that we accept and approve the 7 late but now complete renewals listed, noting that compliance may follow up as appropriate to determine whether violations should be addressed.
Oh, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next, so here's another late but now complete application for review, but this licensee is also adding a principal. The information was shared with the board ahead of this meeting. The new principal currently holds a manufacturing license, previously held a cultivation license as well. But the narratives and timelines for renewal have been shared with the board, and at this point, the licensing division has a favorable recommendation.
Is there a motion to accept and approve?
I move that we accept and approve the late but now complete renewal of Notch Nugs, including authorization under Rule 1.17 to amend the establishment's ownership structure, noting that compliance may follow up as appropriate to determine whether violations for the lateness should be assessed.
Oh, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next, so another late and now complete renewal application. This indoor cultivation license is changing locations from a small home-based site to a larger leased commercial space. The new site has received a passing inspection from our compliance division. I have a note from Melissa that it does not fall within the jurisdiction of the Local Control Commission of Essex Junction. The board has been shared narratives and timelines ahead of this meeting, and at this point, we do have a favorable recommendation from the licensing team.
Is there a motion to accept and approve?
I just have a
Oh, sure.
clarification.
Yes, sorry.
So it doesn't fall within the jurisdiction of the local control commission because it's not retail, is that right? Or is?
No, like Melissa.
No.
Essex Junction has a very specific list of streets.
Okay.
And it falls outside of that list of
Okay,
streets.
cool. Thank you.
Right. Is there a motion to approve?
I move that we accept and approve the late but now complete renewal of Happy Farm Cannabis Company, including authorization under Rule 1.17 to relocate from Colchester to Essex Junction.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, so now we have our late and incomplete renewal application for you here. As explained in the application materials available to the board, there are a few outstanding deliverables for this specific applicant. Most importantly, there is no current right to occupy or location. This licensee has lost their formerly leased space and have not found a new site. The licensee also did not offer a written statement of good cause to the board. Given all of the above, our licensing division does not recommend granting an extension since our team has not received any communication from the licensee in response to the outreach. If not extended, this means that this license will expire on September 2nd of this year. And of course, if expired, the licensee could petition the board for reinstatement under Rule 1.15.2D.
Okay. And do you want a motion to refuse to accept the expiration?
That would be the
extension?
recommendation
Yep.
from the staff.
Well, I wonder if because it's incomplete that we really can't take it up. It would just expire in due course.
Yeah, we could, I mean, for the sake of the 4-minute keeper, we could do just a motion to note for the record.
Okay,
Of what you've decided.
okay,
Or the posture.
okay.
Is there a motion for that?
I move that we note that the renewal application of 802 Glue is late and incomplete, cannot be taken up, meaning that the license will expire in due course.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. And the last thing that I have for you is the board, it's on the agenda, has been asked to consider a request from a Tier 1 outdoor cultivator to graduate into Tier 2 outdoor as allowed under our Rule 1.3.4. The board has been shared information ahead of this meeting.
Yep. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Is there any questions about this one?
That's great.
Is there a motion to approve the request?
I move that the board find that SCLT 0279 has satisfied Rule 1.3.4 criteria to graduate from Tier 1 outdoor to Tier 2 outdoor.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. That was my last slide for you guys.
Right.
Yeah.
Great job.
Oh,
That's
sorry.
good.
Yeah.
That's good.
We did add an executive session. And again, for the people watching, this will be the last thing on the agenda. We don't take any action during executive session, and I don't think there's any action needed for this matter. So as soon as we get back from executive session, we're just going to adjourn. So no need to stick around and watch that unless you want to. So Julie, is there a motion to enter into executive session?
I move that the board enter into executive session pursuant to 1 VSA 313A1 for the purposes of discussing investigative matters specifically deemed confidential by 7 VSA 901A, as well as the provision of professional legal services relative to civil litigation to which the board is party of record, premature general public knowledge of which would be clearly place the public body for or person involved at substantial disadvantage. I am very tired today.
And I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Always glad I get to just say it. Less it's always on.
My fire alarm went off at 3:00 this morning, so I'm tired.
So yeah, Nicole, do you have access to our kind of away message that just says that we're in executive session?
Yes, do you see it on the screen?
Not yet, but
yet.
it looks like it's about to pop up.
Brilliant.
Buff.
There we
There
go.
we go. All right, great. So we're just going to mute and turn off our camera.
Time is it?
3:45.
It's 3:45.
Okay, it's 3:45. We've returned from executive session and we're adjourning the meeting.
Thank you, everybody.